Monuments and memorials often show off the pinnacle of human construction and engineering ability. But just like any other complex development project, sometimes things just don't work out according to plan. Here are 10 of the most fascinating examples of this. Starting off the list, we have the highly controversial vessel in New York's Hudson Yards. The vessel is a massive, bizarre sculpture located in the new $25 billion megadevelopment at New York's Hudson Yards. The sculpture is, at its core, a series of intertwined stairways rising to about 150 feet tall. Original cost estimates were $75 million, but by the time the project was done, it had been more than doubled. Some have praised the structure as a great achievement and an incredible addition to the New York skyline, while others have criticized the sculpture for being gaudy and unnecessary. Besides its appearance, the vessel's also had problems with people jumping off of it. Unfortunately, it had to be closed several times due to tragic incidents. It's since reopened with additional safeguards in place, including extended railings and nets. Also, they made a rule that people can't go up there solo anymore. Hopefully, these new measures will help prevent any future tragic incidents, but unfortunately, the ones that have already happened have cast a dark shadow over this monument. Next up at number 9, we have the Monument to the Revolution in Mexico City. In the early 1900s, planning began on a large building in Mexico City that would be used by Mexican legislators. Its design was very similar to the United States Capitol. Construction began and substantial progress was made on the central portion of the building. But then, as the Mexican Revolution gained momentum, progress on this building slowed and then halted altogether in 1912. During the turmoil surrounding the Mexican Revolution and for the following decade, the partially completed structure stood idle. Finally, an architect named Carlos Santacia came up with a plan to convert the incomplete structure into a monument dedicated to significant individuals from the Revolution. The plan came to fruition, and today the Monument of the Revolution is one of the more iconic structures in the city. Over the years, the monument's been improved and upgraded. Visitors can now take an elevator up to an observation deck high up in the structure. Interestingly, also, the monument houses the remains of famous Mexicans, including Pancho Villa. Down at number 8, we have the Bedford Limestone Pyramid. In an effort to attract more tourists and to show off their high-quality stone products, the town of Bedford, Indiana set out to build a replica of the Great Pyramid. It would stand almost 100 feet tall and would be an exact 1/5 model. To get the project going, a well-connected politician was able to secure $700,000 in federal tax dollars. In 1980, the first stones began to be set in place. Around this time, word began to spread regarding the source of the funding. Public backlash began to build, and in 1981, the project was the recipient of the notorious Golden Fleece Award, an award intended to mock corrupt pork barrel government spending. Following this revelation, federal funding was abruptly cut off and the partially completed project ended. Today, all that remains is a large pile of very expensive government rocks. The project was also set to include a replica of the Great Wall of China, but thankfully this portion of the project never got started. At number 7, we have the Embrace in Boston, Massachusetts. In 2017, the city of Boston began reviewing proposals for a new monument to be featured in a highly visible location in one of its most well-attended parks. The goal of the monument was to commemorate the life and achievements of Martin Luther King Jr. Over the next several years, more than 100 proposals were considered. Finally, in 2022, the winning proposal, entitled The Embrace, was installed. In early 2023, the monument was officially dedicated. The project received mostly negative feedback, with most criticisms relating to the unusual design. Some went as far to say the sculpture looked pornographic, while others simply said it was ugly. Despite the backlash, the team behind the project decided to not make any changes to the design. One silver lining to this project is that it was fully privately funded and didn't use any taxpayer dollars. At number 6, we have the Buzlundzha monument in Bulgaria. There's a number of bizarre monuments scattered across the former Soviet Union dedicated to socialist and communist political organizations. One of the most unusual can be found on the top of a mountain in Bulgaria. Work started on the Buzlundzha monument in 1974. Before work on the building started, the mountain peak was actually blasted down about 30 feet. From there, over 6,000 workers spent the next 7 years constructing the UFO-like monument. After the Soviet Union fell, so too did interest in monuments dedicated to their political ideology. The monument closed and over the years fell into disrepair. In recent years, though, there's been several attempts to preserve the monument site. On to number 5, we have the Wings Over Water sculpture in Houston, Texas. When it was built, Wings Over Water was billed as one of the largest kinetic sculptures in America. The project's artist described the sculpture by saying, "Due to the sculpture's constant movement, the viewer's experience is also constantly changing, thereby drawing visitors to the site to watch its evolution. The sculpture's curvilinear forms will be in stark contrast to the largely orthogonal architecture that surrounds it. The perpetual motion of the wings creates an energetic focal point that invites viewers to watch the mesmerizing movement of the undulating surfaces." There's just one problem though. In the 5 years since it was built, the kinetic sculpture has struggled to stay kinetic. In all, over $500,000 in extra money has been spent on repairs to the sculpture. Issues with the security shutoff system, the motor, and the nearby fountain have all contributed to these costs. Given the mounting repair costs and the past repair difficulties, recently it was announced that the kinetic sculpture would now be a permanently static sculpture. Despite being motionless these days, it still draws a crowd of curious onlookers. At number 4, we have the Petrova Gora monument in Croatia. Although it may not look like a typical war memorial, this unusual structure was actually built to commemorate the sacrifices made by the ethnic Serb peasants in World War II. Axis forces entered the region in 1942 looking to rid the area of this group. Despite little military experience, the locals attempted to resist the more dominant invading Axis forces. In 1970, a competition was held to determine the design of the monument that would memorialize these valiant sacrifices. A design was selected, but it was later determined to be too costly to build. 4 years later, a second design competition was held. This time around, the design that would eventually be built was selected. Construction did not actually start until the latter part of the decade, and the monument opened in 1982. The monument, which also housed a museum, was a futuristic design wrapped in stainless steel. The design was controversial, but many appreciated the bold look. A decade later, during the Yugoslav Wars, the monument became a target for looters and vandals. Steel panels were stripped from the building, and less than a decade after it opened, the monument had fallen into complete disrepair. Deterioration of the site has continued to this day, and the monument received a further indignity when an antenna was stuck on top. Today, there's some who would like to see the site renovated, while others have called for its demolition. At number 3, we have the Alai Minar, an unfinished monument located in New Delhi, India. It was commissioned by Sultan Alauddin Khilji in the early 14th century as an ambitious project to surpass the height of a nearby monument. The Sultan envisioned his monument to be twice as tall as the existing one, standing as a testament to his power and achievements. Construction began around 1300, but the project was abandoned after the Sultan's death in 1316. Today, the circular base of the structure remains, reaching a height of approximately 80 feet. Despite its unfinished state, the monument remains an integral part of the UNESCO World Heritage Site, offering a glimpse into the architectural past of New Delhi. At number 2, we have the Concord Spirit Poles. In an effort to spruce up a once bland median strip in the heart of Concord, California, the local government decided to allocate $100,000 for an art installation. The art project would be a series of spiked poles along the roadside. A total of 91 poles would be installed, with some reaching a height of nearly 5 stories. After the project was built, there was significant community backlash, most of which centered around the project's harsh and somewhat sinister appearance. Several years later, long, narrow streamers were added to the spiky poles in an effort to soften their appearance, but most agreed that it didn't solve the issue. By the end of the 1990s, the poles began to suffer from structural issues, with one even blowing over in a windstorm. In 2001, the poles were removed and placed in storage. The artist who did them protested the decision and has spent years fighting to keep his art on display. I was hesitant to put this one on this list because there's a lot of things I like about it, but I figured I'd put it as an honorable mention, the Crazy Horse Memorial in Black Hills, South Dakota. The idea for this project started in 1931, and in 1939, Korzak Ziolkowski was recruited to carve the monument. Work didn't actually begin until 1948. The project accepted no government money, but instead was carved using only donations and revenue generated by the entrance fees to the park. Progress is slow, and in the last 70 years, the only part of the monument that's really complete is the face. Construction is ongoing, but it's unclear exactly when it'll get done. The project hasn't been without controversy. Many Lakota individuals oppose the project. They feel that the focus has been put on the Ziolkowski family instead of Crazy Horse and the Native American tribes in the area. Others have opposed the project for the environmental impact. Finally, at number 1, we have the National Monument of Scotland. Following the Napoleonic Wars, planning began in Scotland for a monument that would be built in remembrance of those soldiers who had been killed. Plans were extravagant and called for a large stone monument which would take design cues from the Parthenon. By 1826, construction had begun and the columns began rising out of the ground. Unfortunately, funding had not been fully secured, and within a year, the future of the project was uncertain. The project was put on hold in 1829 after only 12 columns were finished. In the centuries since, there have been numerous proposals for finishing the project, but none ever came to fruition. Over the years, the incomplete project has been embraced and it's lost its reputation for being a failed project. In 1966, a Scotland historical group listed the building as a Class A historical building. As always, thanks for watching. New videos out every weekend.